It's been said the whole world is a stage and everybody plays a part. But the question remains, who's writing the script?
I feel like in order for you to really break through certain barriers, you got to find your role in it, hold yourself accountable, become conscious on what the action steps is to change, and go ahead and execute. And when doing so, you more than likely will need some type of line of support, some type of community who's there for you. And just being one who can lead by example, I know I can do that and extend myself to others, those who come from my background.
And being a youth who didn't have his father totally involved in his life, I realized that there were a number of youth who also had that missing element, so I wanted to be able to give back what I didn't have, and that was someone to kind of mentor me through the tough times, the adolescent stages.
The biggest challenge for me within the substance abuse field is taking a young man and trying to instill or teach him a better value system than what we learn in the street.
As a survivor of child sexual abuse, I knew that we had to do something. I mean, it's one thing to just walk around and be angry, and hurt and feel powerless all the time. But it's another thing to use that energy for good.
I remember at 10 years old, I just looked at my sisters and myself as well and just said, when I grow up, I'm going to help hurting women and girls, if I live to grow up.
Transform is a non-profit organization that I started to help survivors of domestic violence process trauma. As a survivor myself, when I was experiencing it, I had to find a way to keep myself sane.
Welcome to Around the Fire.
Hi, it's good to see you. Come on in and join us here at Around the Fire. I'm your host, Jason Thomas, and today we're going to be talking to some people from the community whose life's journey has led them to their life's mission as Wayshowers. Now, first, let me give you an idea of what Wayshowers are. One who is a Wayshower often has experienced and overcome many difficulties that life has given them. And it left them with wisdom, insight, compassion, ability, and determination to help others go through their struggles. So let's meet the Wayshowers. How's everybody doing today?
Fine.
Great.
How are you?
All right, we're going to start. Larry, you have a mentoring program that you started. Can you tell us a little bit of how you started the program?
So it started out of my work with families, particularly with youth in crisis. I've worked with a number of families, both in the South as well here in the North. And being a youth who didn't have his father totally involved in his life, I realized that there were a number of youth who also had that missing element, so I wanted to be able to give back what I didn't have, and that was someone to kind of mentor me through the tough times, the adolescent stages, and that kind of thing. So that was the impetus to my finding Edwards Mentoring and Social Services.
Okay. And I see that you deal a lot with male privilege. Can you explain a little bit about what that is and how that affects us?
Sure. So also I offer counseling services. I'm a licensed counselor. I get a lot of couples, and male privilege is an element of domestic violence, and particularly in communities of color, it looks differently than it looks in the general society. So the male privilege that I see on a day-to-day basis comes with the gender inequality in communities of color, where male have a different advantage, especially males of color, that they don't understand that they have in that relationship that they share within communities of color. So male privilege is about advantages, and it is about those advantages being taken or utilized at the expense of women of color. So we tackle that, in the counseling sessions, and I bring it to the mentoring because it comes to youth in the form of misogyny and understanding what we see in pop culture, particularly black pop culture. We see a lot of misogynist material that kind of distorts how young black men see young black women. So we try to control that by addressing it before it gets out of hand.
Okay, so now the male privilege. Do you mentor young girls? Too?
Yes.
And how do they explain that phenomenon of male privilege?
How do young girls?
Yeah,
Well,
how
you know
does that
what?
affect them?
I think from a socialization standpoint, a lot of young women of color doesn't realize they're in that position. So it's not until you identify it and help them see it that they realize and come to terms with it. We could go into depth about how there's certain lingo used toward women of color, young girls even, that sometimes they take on a role not understanding the implications of what those definitions mean. The interesting thing is how when I approach it with men and young boys, it's like, would you want your sister or your mother or your aunt or some female figure close to you to be called or treated in a manner that is disrespectful, and helping them see it that way. So the challenge for them, for women, is to really stop and realize, wow, I'm not being treated as equal. I'm not being respected as equal. So it's tackled in that way.
Well said. Going off of that, I know that Rosalyn is a developer of young girls, right?
I have a mentorship program. Yes, I'm a mentor.
Can you explain a little bit about Sisters Building Sisters?
Well, Sisters Building Sisters is a nonprofit organization, and it is simply just what it says: Sisters Building Sisters, sisters empowering one another. It's an organization that's geared to empowering women and girls. So it empowers women in their 80s. It doesn't, we don't discriminate on age. You could be 75, you could be 65. All of our workshops, we have workshops and different types of events in the community and abroad to empower women and girls. Self-esteem workshops, self-love. We work with domestic violence.
You have mentoring workshops that help the women deal with those certain situations?
Yes, we have workshops on healthy versus unhealthy relationships, because sometimes people don't know. They're in a dysfunctional relationship, or they may be experiencing, most of the time if you're in a domestic violence relationship, it's a dysfunctional love going on. It's a toxic love going on. And sometimes people really don't know what they're in.
Right. And how did you start the organization? Because you started it, right?
I did. I felt that there was a need. I knew that there was a need since I was 10 years old. I was experiencing, I was a broken girl. I was a broken young girl. I was 10 years old, and my life stemmed from domestic violence. I didn't experience it firsthand because I was a 5-month-old baby, and if I did, I don't really remember, of course. But I remember at 10 years old, I just looked at my sisters and myself as well, and just said, when I grow up, I'm going to help hurting women and girls, if I live to grow up. And I lived to grow up, so.
All right, empowering. Another thing that affects us in our community is the subject of substance abuse. And Miguel, I understand that you work for an organization that deals with some of those issues.
My organization, I work for an organization called Family Service Network of New York, and I've been in the service field since 2008. I have worked in the substance abuse field in any modality except detox and rehab. I have lived there personally. Some of my family members have been victims of this epidemic. So yeah, that's my experience with substance abuse.
And so, on a personal level, so do you do mentoring?
Currently, I work dealing with medical issues most of the time. I'm no longer within the substance abuse field. Full time, I work on a personal level with individuals who are dealt with substance abuse and are currently, moving on with their lives and rebuilding their lives, and I serve sort of as a mentor to them. My work that I do every day is helping people get connected with services, medical and mental health. I see a lot of substance abuse or precipitated issues. I see the domestic violence through neglect most of the time. I'm a care manager currently, and so I have to go into people's houses and see what is the level of need. And a lot of times I find women and men whom their loved ones have completely neglected. And that is the biggest thing that I see in my field. The neglect that happens because somebody picked up a drug or a drink and forgot about their loved ones, or what happens to the person coping with substance abuse, who doesn't know how to talk about these issues that are hurting them. And so what happens most of the time, the outcome is they act this frustration of their loved ones, or they turn against themselves. So that's basically what I see.
So you're more like counseling, and these are more adults, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the adult level. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Al, I hear your story is a very interesting story about the street life, and I know that some of the issues that we've been talking about it touches a lot of the youth and the adults in our community. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I got the organization called Light Love. You spell it LITELUV. It stands for Learning Intellectually Through Experience. Love understands value. Connecting it to just the subject matter that we got going on here.
Wait, say that again.
Learning intellectually through experience. Love understands value. Light
Exactly.
Love. Right? And so when you tie it into the subject matter, when you look at some of the factors that play into the likes of DV, substance abuse, being lost and not being able to identify who you are, how you abuse it and privilege, you got to take a moment and really learn from the experiences that you lived through. And so through this organization, I'm real big on providing a level of self-awareness and a comfort of accountability. I feel like in order for you to really break through certain barriers, you got to find your role in it, hold yourself accountable, become conscious on what the action steps is to change, and go ahead and execute. And when doing so, you more than likely will need some type of line of support, some type of community who's there for you. And just being one who can lead by example, I know I could do that and extend myself to others, those who come from my background.
Now, your story is an interesting story where you had to make a choice between the street life and going to college. Like, how did you make that decision?
I'm delighted to be able to smile just in the reference of the thought. But I grew up in Harlem. I was real hands-on. I'm the youngest of 4, and I'm the only boy as well. I got siblings that's 18 years older than me, one 14 years older than me, one that's 3 years older than me. Like, my life was so intense, legit, within the last 3 days, I found out that my mother had me at 47. Like, I'm still learning just certain things about my life. So I was gang-related by 10, like legit 10 years old. I'm in Harlem. You can ask about certain people. They'll be able to say, oh, he was outside. And I just found myself embracing the culture because I was trying to find my place in the world. What was going on in my household. It wasn't a lack of love, but my grandmother who raised me, she was 64 when I was born. Her focus wasn't really about affection. It was to ensure that I knew how to provide for myself, navigate the world, be self-aware. So a lot of my upbringing focused on mannerisms and the power of education. But as far as self-identity, learning when it's important not to get caught up with the wrong crowd and things like that, I had to learn the hard way. I went through it. I've always been one to just take my consequences and keep my head high. But after I went through a little stint, I went through whatever systems as a juvenile, but then as an adult, I found myself going through something where legit, when it came into my life, I was living the best of both worlds. I was in college, I had a job getting good money, but I would legit get off work and go facilitate gang meetings. I would come to work with firearms on me. I would, like, just the different ways I was living in between both worlds, you wouldn't believe it. And so God had to really come in and tell me, you're not using your talents right. And so with that, I found myself sitting down on the famous Rikers Island. And I just took a moment, I looked around the room or the dorm I was in, and I realized, yeah, this is not what I want to make the rest of my life on. So much of my mailbox before having to turn myself in, because I was on bail for some time, was filled with letters from a lot of my homies who kept me in tune with the culture even before I really had to sit there as an adult. So when I got there, and I just realized how much of a difference I've already, like, I was a big homie and I didn't have to go through experience. I said, oh yeah, this is not going to be my norm. I had to dig deep, find out what it was about me and all my belief windows that made me even participate in some of the things that I did, because at that point, I was far in. And when I realized that none of those things really is going to be able to take me in a bank, cash a check, it ain't going to keep Con Ed on, because I'm 18, but I'm paying bills at the time, I just, I got to shift it. And so I stand in that space today.
So you were in college while that dual life,
I'm
you were taking guns to...
I'm going to give you an example where I was at one point. I was in a group home from 13 to about 17. I get out the group home, I go to a school in Harlem. I'm not going to give the name to the school out of respect to the other platforms in the room. And I was told I wasn't going to graduate till close to 19. I was so dedicated and militant at the time that I ended up graduating at 17. Like the summer, I went to day school, night school, evening school. I got out 17, right? But at that time, I go into college, community college. And so I had friends who was in college upstate. I go visit them. It was a barn party. I realized they needed party favors just to be appropriate for the scene. And I was well connected. I came back to the city, got the party favors, and my focus became that. And so when I was going to class, I was going to class more or less to show off where I stood at fashionably, finances and all that. And I would do my thing in class, but everybody called me Al. But my real name, my government name is Rithel Roden. And so just being caught up in my lifestyle, not really focused on the mission, I would go to class, pass tests, and so wrap up the semester, I failed the course, couldn't understand why. I go to the teacher like, ma'am, I don't understand how I'm feeling. She said, what you mean? You passed those tests, give me a test. But I used to write Al, Roden. Nobody would connect that. Rithel Roden is me. So she felt Rithel because I would even write, real comfortable and cocky in myself, not realizing what I'm doing. I would write Al on the attendance sheet, never put my, so I had to learn from that, just simple things like, when you realize that you're selling yourself short, if you hold yourself accountable, you're going to make the necessary changes.
And now she changed the grade, right?
I didn't even fight it. I was so young and naive to how it was going to directly impact me. It didn't connect the dots because I was living. I'm paying bills. I'm young. I got siblings who would come to me and borrow a couple of $100s at a time. It's not an issue. I'm, well-known. Popularity will kill your focus. It'll have you thinking everything is good when it ain't. And that's probably some of the things that a good mentor would be able to do. And so when I started to listen to some of the old, I was privileged to be around a lot of the older guys in my neighborhood who seen my potential and would always hint at it. It was on me to just live and step into it, and so I did that.
Now, how you deal mainly with the youth, right?
Yeah, that's my focus point because I just know that if you meet a youth and you get them to understand that where they at is just that, it's a stage, it's not really forever, then you can inflict reason for change earlier in the game. You don't have to catch them when they at the parole board or in the men's shelter. You got to meet them where they at and have the tough conversations that the average person probably would stray away from. And I'm here with it. So if I got to start with a music lyric, a dance move, a good hoodie from Polo, Ralph Lauren, to get them to understand that I can connect and then bring over the mission, then that's my approach today.
And how do they find your organization?
I'm outside. I'm not gonna lie, I go to a lot of the different neighborhoods that the average person doing what I do won't do. I'm not really one to promote myself online. I use social platforms and some of my friends who's very influential in my neighborhood where I'm from to get me on the scenes to have the conversation. I'm working with the likes of Wanda to learn how to get myself more formal. She's introduced me to some great people here who I know I can tap into and learn how to just bring it over on that side of things. But right now I'm outside. You wanna see me, remember my face, ask me a question, and I got you.
That's good. That's great. All right, let us turn over here again. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. Now, your organization, Healing Begins, right?
Where the healing begins.
Where the healing
Yes.
begins. How did this organization come to be?
Well, it's, of course, I wonder if you've heard the old adage, your misery can be turned into your message. And that is definitely the case for me with the name of that organization. As a survivor of child sexual abuse, I knew that we had to do something. I mean, it's one thing to just walk around and be angry, and hurt and feel powerless all the time. But it's another thing to use that energy for good, that anger for good. And so where the healing began came into being out of me trying to address some of the issues that I was facing with myself, within my daughter, many friends and family who had shared private information with me about their struggles and what they had gone through. So where the healing began came into being that very day, again, when I was addressing an issue, and that name came to me, Where the Healing Begins, and I knew that that's what the name of the organization would be. Again, to use that energy to be able to provide support services and let people know that they are not alone. Which we all know that people, when we're going through things, you think you're the only one that's going through it, or the only one that it has happened to. And then I needed to let people know that you're not alone, and to provide support services for people. So where the healing began, of course, the mission is to provide support services for survivors of abuse, particularly child sexual abuse. And so we utilize those services using a CASE acronym. Counseling, which we would do in the form of support groups, and also counseling referrals, advocacy, where we would participate in a community awareness walk where we would share information about child sexual abuse, particularly how to prevent it from happening in your family and community, or if it does, how to react responsibly by getting the help that the children often need. The Essence Support Services, providing housing referrals, food service referrals, getting people into educational programs that can help them move forward, improve their standard of life. And finally, the education component would consist of utilizing a program which is called Darkness to Light, Stewards of Children, where we would show adults how to protect children from child sexual abuse, and again, how to react responsibly to incidents of child sexual abuse. And so again, because it is an adult responsibility to protect children.
Now, during the counseling and things, you counsel the children and also like the parents and the adults?
Well, right now our support group focuses on adults who have experienced forms of abuse, again, particularly child sexual abuse.
Oh, okay.
And we provide those services, usually we conduct meetings within an 8-week period, and where we would have a theme every evening to address different subjects regarding that healing process, particularly talking to the child or how old you were when the abuse occurred, and being able to provide different kinds of services or different kinds of information that female survivors can use. And the support group is called Triumph, because you're triumphing over, the tragedy.
Right.
You're moving forward. You are, letting go of the anger that occurs. And so we also have a male support group that we have a man addressing or facilitating those support groups. So, but yeah, that's what we do. And for survivors, oftentimes need individual or private counseling.
Right.
So we'll make referrals or show them the registry that they can call, different places that they can call to, again, to be able to participate in their own support as far as counseling is concerned.
And we all have the wherewithal. Well, let me start again. We all are here addressing these social issues that are out in the community. And I think one of the fascinating ways that people deal with it is through an organization that Wanda does called Art Transform, right?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about that program and how it helps people deal with their traumas and social misgivings.
All right. Art Transform is a nonprofit organization that I started to help survivors of domestic violence process trauma. As a survivor myself, when I was experiencing it, I had to find a way to keep myself sane. And so I have been an artist since maybe about 13. I discovered that I could create art, and it was very relaxing for me, and it distracted me from whatever was going on internally, that I could create a piece of art and I didn't focus on whether I was hurting or I had an emotional upheaval. And so it worked for me, and it has worked for me all of my life. As I was listening to Al, and from a female perspective, I lived a double life. I grew up in Harlem too. And some of the things that he talked about, and I'm getting flashbacks, that I also experienced. And I had my life that was Harlem based, but I had my life that I went to school. I always was in school. I was in college bound. Then, you know, I went on to college and postgraduate, but I still had that part of me that was still connected to Harlem like it was in the old days. And so bringing that together with the art, it allowed me, I'm a social justice artist, to put that plug in, right? So what it did, it allowed me to look at social ills up close, including the domestic violence that was all around me, and all the dysfunction in the families that was all around me during that time growing up in Harlem. I was able to create art to express it, but I didn't really realize that's what I was doing. I was just making pictures about what I was seeing or about what I was feeling. And it was later when I started to take art classes in college that I started to realize, oh, this is what I was doing. But it was a way for me to process what I was feeling, that I had nobody to talk to about it. That the people around me, if I did talk to them, they wouldn't understand what I was talking about. So how did I start? Why did I start Art Transforms? Because it helped me. The art, the visual art helped me. So now what I do is I teach art, and I also use art as a healing process for other women who are going through domestic violence. And so when you can tap inside to your feelings and emotions and bring it out, whether it's in the form of writing. I also write poetry, but my thing is really the painting. When you can reach inside and bring that pain out, whether you put it on paper or put it on canvas, that frees up something inside of you. It eases that pain that you can look at it. So when I do paintings, social justice, looking at the ills, I'm educating the people. This is what it looks like. You know, in art you can educate and express an idea without talking about it, because some things are too difficult to talk about. Some things are too painful to talk about, and some people can't bring those words, you know, to mention those words because that pain is so deep. But you can do that if you write. You can do that if you paint, and there's other forms of art. And so Art Transforms started that way. Now, what really jump-started it is I did an art exhibit, and a little boy about 9, African-American boy about 9 years old, he was there, and he said to me, he said, I didn't know there was black artists. I was like, wow, this kid has not been exposed. And so it was, I think that was like what put the icing on the cake, that our young people are not getting the exposure of artists taken out of the schools, you know, budget cuts, or it's too expensive for them to afford. So what I do, I write grants, get funding, so I can provide free art class, so that I can get supplies and expose the young people in the community to free art. And so what we do is we create not just busy arts and craft, we create real art, visual art right now, and we do art exhibits. And in the art exhibits,
From the people who
from
participate.
the community, yes, from the community. I've been doing it for about 5 years. And so we just did a social justice art exhibit. The producer of this program was there. And the children, the young people's art was there on the table. And of course, we had some more seasoned artists that was there. It was at Jamaica JCal.
JCal, yes.
Yes, it was at JCal, and we have done that social justice art exhibit for the past 4 years. So this makes the 4th year, and we get a lot of support from the local politicians, Senator, you know, I don't know if I could name them, but but you know, we get support from the community. And so we have annually, we do an introduction of the new artists. And so what we do is bring all of the young people and seniors, because what happened was the seniors was bringing the young people, and then the seniors started to create art too. So
I
it's
want to play
actually,
too.
yes, so actually now it's intergenerational. And so we introduce.
How many mediums do you just do painting, or
We
do you
just
do
do
sculpture?
painting,
Or?
and no, we don't do that. We just do painting, visual art. We use acrylic paint on canvas, and so we annually we get all the artwork created through the previous year, and we have introducing the new artist exhibit at Thomasino's.
Okay.
We've been doing that for 2 years now. We have some plan coming up in 2020.
All right, as Wayshowers, I think it's important for us to show the way and explain some of the case studies and experiences that you've had with your organization. Miguel, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the mentoring process and some of the difficult things that arise in mentoring or counseling or finding out situations out in the community?
Well, when dealing with young men, because I work in the substance abuse field, I work mostly with young men, mostly coming from incarceration, you know, and early intervention situation. So the case is working with individuals who don't have the coping mechanisms as other regular people have. You know, when you grow up in the street, when you engage in illegal activity early on or are witness to that, just then you sort of have a murky value system.
Yes.
You know, and so you are unable to recognize I want to say the symptoms, you know, of domestic violence,
Right.
because you're just intoxicated, or nobody has shown you or taken the time because they are intoxicated, or they are living a particular lifestyle. So the biggest challenge for me within the substance abuse field is taking a young man and trying to instill or teach him some a better value system than what we learn in the street. You know, that is my experience.
And Anita, can you talk to some of the personal experiences that you've had, especially like with young kids? It seems like I know that you deal with the adults and their past trauma. As a child, how did their experience like relate in growing into, you know, actually I know it's probably really hard to come out and say, or, you know, to announce, you know, that they've been sexually abused. How do they deal with that?
So many, you know, children have had to, you know, deal with this issue, have become traumatized because the few children that have been brave enough or to been able to share their experience even at an early age, some were not believed, which traumatizes them even more. You know, usually during those formative years when children are really, you know, just learning and their personalities are being formed, but their sense of self and who they are has been compromised, you know, by older cousins or older siblings or moms or stepdads or dads or, you know, neighbors have traumatized them, you know, through, you know, touching them inappropriately, which is what child sexual abuse is. It is the unwanted, unsolicited, you know, behavior, sexual behavior that a person that is perceived to have more power, you know, over a child exudes on a child. The statistics tell us that 1 in every 10 children will have some form of sexual abuse before their 18th birthday. So there's usually 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. So the statistics, you know, toward both genders are very similar. So, you know, in the old days, you know, people used to think, oh, you know, the girls, it was a difference between, you know, you having to, you know, watch the little girls, but the little boys could go out and play and do whatever. But we now know with the statistics that we have to watch both. You know, we have to be as diligent in protecting our young boys as girls. You know, we really, really do.
Now, does that that phenomena come into play because of what we were talking about earlier with the male privilege? Is that they don't relay that they have been sexually abused more than the little girl?
Well, it's hard. It's hard for any gender, you know, to reveal that level of trauma. Right. But yes, it is definitely the case with, you know, young males. Some males feel like, you know, because of the society standards of what a man, you know, is supposed to be, they're supposed to be strong, you know, they're supposed to be, you know, tough, they're supposed to be able to handle whatever. But when you think about it, you know, that they were children, they were vulnerable. Boys are just as vulnerable as girls are when they're children. So that, you know, to help them to be able to, you know, work through those emotions, to say this did happen to me, it was not my fault. You know, that yes, I am a boy, I'm a man now, but I was a little boy, I was a child. I could not help myself, I could not protect myself. Adults are supposed to protect children. It is the adult's responsibility. And sometimes we drop the ball. We as adults drop the ball. Not sometimes intentionally, and sometimes depending on the situation, it happens. But we as adults now who are trying to, you know, deal with whatever happened to us as children, I want society to know that there is help out there now. I want our community to know that there is help out there now. That even though the statistics for the white race is the same, basically the same for, you know, the African American community, but unfortunately, African Americans are less likely to receive services, you know, to help us to be able to navigate through the healing process. And that is what where the healing begins wants to do, to let people know, especially within our community, that there is help out there and that you don't have to continue to suffer in silence.
Yes, and as Wayshowers, I know that building the community is paramount. I'd like to talk to you. Do you do any outreach for like entrepreneurships with the Sisters Building Sisters?
It's in the works.
It's in the
as
works,
far
okay.
as reaching out to founders, other founders and leaders that want to start organizations or is actually starting organizations because it's a struggle. You know, we say, oh, I want to start an organization, but most people don't even know what's required, what's necessary to start a nonprofit. You know, you hear people say, oh, you should start a nonprofit and you could get grants from city council or, you know, from the government.
Mm-hmm.
But some people don't know. We didn't know, like, we really needed a board. We knew we needed a board, but we didn't really think it out. That it couldn't just be the community folks or my loved ones or my best friends. It should be more so people, bankers, fundraisers, people that know how to do fundraisers. I mean, big time fundraising. Baking cookies is fine, but for where you want to go, you really need a professional fundraiser. You need attorneys. There's different bookkeeping. You need someone to really take care of the books, a bookkeeper or an accountant for once or twice throughout the year. And a lot of people don't know that. Some people come together and they have great minds and great ideas, but do you know how to really sit down and write up a proposal to get the grant? So
She start those conversations for.
so
She start those conversations for the people to get
right.
them to
So
come together.
that's
Okay, so you're
That's
like
what we're
you're like a
looking-
go-between for that.
yes, we do that, but we haven't had a platform.
But that's something you're looking
But
to
when
grow
we have
into.
it, you're welcome to come.
Okay. All right. All right, Larry.
Yes.
Tell us one of the struggles it is to mentoring these young African American adults.
I wouldn't call it a struggle. It's a test of my patience. I love what I do. I love the people that come and sit before me. It's the struggle is sometimes my dealing with the story of the hurt and the pain.
Give us an example.
I remember when I was actually a director of a nonprofit program serving fathers. I remember a young man coming in, calling me and told me he didn't want to do a group. He wanted to sit with me one-on-one. He came in, we worked through why he was coming in, and initially he thought he was struggling with anger management issues. He was the son of a mother who was a heroin addict, and she was in recovery. His father had done 25 years in prison for murder. His struggle was he was engaged. His fiance wanted or insisted that he move his mother into their home. Now, sorting through that, I discovered that he had been molested by one of his mother's partners, and he was struggling with he has to take care of someone who didn't take care of him. And then we compound that with, as he's navigating his community on the day-to-day, even to come see me, he's passing one of his perpetrators on the day-to-day basis that he wants to literally kill.
Yeah.
But he has a son. And he's grappling with, if he kills this guy,
Then where's
he
his son
leaves
gonna
his
go? Yeah.
son in the position he was in
Left.
as his father left him. So those are some of the situations and circumstances that come and sit in my office that I have to remain in a professional disposition and help them sort through. So that's just one of many traumatic and really challenging scenarios that I see on a day-to-day basis. My clientele ranges from the GED to the PhD. Every socioeconomic background you can think of. You know, when I sit here and I hear the stories of my esteemed panel, these are the people that makes up my clientele. Speaking to what Anita said, for a long time in communities of color, getting counseling was a stigma. You know, so even with creating my company, I had to be really careful of how I named it. Therefore, I came up with mentoring and opposed to Edwards Counseling and Social Services, because counseling has very deep stigmatizing implications. So I got creative, and I had to navigate some of the things my colleague here mentioned about how to set this up. So yeah, the stories are very, very heart-wrenching, but to see the healing and to get a phone call from the gentleman I referenced with the mother situation years later and hear that he's doing fine, that he is married and he's gotten over that, you know, that's the gratification I get from the work and having started my own counseling firm.
Al, do you have any examples of mentoring any of
I mean, I would say that's a prime example. I would be the guy who would say, take advantage of a Mr. Larry in your neighborhood. Because it was not being scared of the conversations that I had with Mr. Larry Young that I didn't listen to then, that came to the front of my thoughts when I was sitting down, having to deal with my consequences, and realizing that there was somebody who took a moment, who spoke life into me, who gave me other options, who provided insight that at the time I didn't see to be cool. And so I'm here to make that cool. I'm here to make it okay to find a reason to go ahead and speak about that hardship or that trauma, whether it's in private or in public, but get working on it, because today or tomorrow you're gonna have to tap into it, turn it into strength to be productive in America. I'm here to allow a person to say, you can acknowledge that you was dealing and dibbling, dabbling with whatever substance abuse or whatever, you know, egotistical ways that minimize you from thinking the most productive or most positive way. All right, we over that. We identified that. Let's hold accountability and move past it. I'm here to tell a person, like, listen, get next to the sister Rosalyn, who's putting y'all together, who's allowing y'all to identify as a team and putting y'all on a mission together so you don't feel alone. Like, that's truly what I represent. And I'm prideful about it because I went through this process alone, although it's a lot of love. And so I think that's what me and Wanda can relate to. In Harlem, there's no way you don't feel love, you don't feel support, but sometimes the support don't fine-tune to what you need as an individual. And you can find yourself on a path of a lot of trials and tribulations that can offset exactly where you can be and stagnate your destiny. And so I'm just here to remind people that it's okay to listen to the people who's speaking positively just as quick as you find it to be cooler to listen to the people doing all the negatively. Find your balance, step into it, and go ahead. If not, be ready to take the consequences and don't point no fingers. And I know I represent that. And so that's where I'm at. You know, through workshops, through open conversation, I keep that narrative going. And like I said, I'm outside with it, so I know it matters.
And Wanda, can you give us an inspirational story that one of your, I want to say students.
Well, what I would like to give you is a challenge that is very serious. When you look at young women of color across the board, don't have to be of color, just younger women, is the socialization process that occurs when they're little girls. See, women are socialized different than men. Men are socialized to be strong. You don't cry, you don't show your emotions, you are out of touch, you know, with your inner self. This is how you're socialized. All right, you fall down, get up, don't cry, you're a sissy. Whereas girls, and the other thing, men are socialized, okay to have more than one woman. I mean, let's be frank about it. They're not looked at as this is something bad, but now women do that. It's a different thing, and that goes back to the male privilege.
Yes.
So men are socialized, women are socialized, they're given little dolls, little teacups and plates and pots and little stoves and vacuum cleaners and Susie Baker oven, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Okay.
You get those, all those little things are really preparing them for a gender role. Now, what happens as they become, you know, they get into their relationships, and unfortunately, some are going to come from dysfunctional families, those roles continue. So it's okay for the males to control, and that's what domestic violence is about, power and control over a woman, because you've been socialized that this is what you're supposed to do. So in my work, the challenge is getting the women to understand that this is what's happening to you, that this is what you have been prepared to do and to accept. You have been prepared to be a servant to the men.
So what I'd like to do is go around and everybody give a quick golden nugget to what they have to offer and how people can reach your services. And you can start.
Okay, thank you again for the opportunity. Where the healing begins, you can reach me by calling 347-526-7417. And our website is being remodeled. So again, you can contact me directly by calling my number. Child sexual abuse is a societal issue, and that is something that I want people to understand. With 70 to 80% of people who are drug and alcohol abusers have been sexually abused. 60% of people of teen first pregnancies are preceded by incidences of child sexual abuse. 90% of people who have been sexual abused know their abuser. So none of that stranger danger stuff exists right now. They are our pastors and neighbors and uncles and stepfathers and dads who are perpetrating, you know, this kind of behavior on our children. So we need to recognize, again, that child sexual abuse is all of our problems. Whether it affects us directly and indirectly, we as a community have to make this a priority so that we can prevent it from happening to future generations.
Thank you. Al.
Oh, so my golden nugget would be trust your process. The safety net to trusting your process is seek first to understand and to be understood. If you need to contact me, lightloveunitedus@gmail.com. I'm real big on just coming out and doing motivational speaking to the youth. I'll do it to 2 people, 40 people, it don't matter. And people who's really ready to have the conversation and hold themselves accountable, that's my thing. And that's just it. But trust your process. I think that's very, very important. A lot of times we get caught up in the moment. We don't believe that we'll come through it. And you really will, but you have to have the desire to. Don't feel defeated. I tell my son who's 7, whatever he's going through, he won't be the first or the last to go through it, but what would be the difference with him going through it? How would he signify his outcome? And that's just what time I'm on.
Rosalyn.
You could find us at our email right now. Our website is www.buildasister.org. It's under construction at this time. It'll be up and running in January. We're revitalizing the whole organization. But you could reach us at SBSB in Brooklyn @gmail.com, or you could contact us at 718-427-6632. And our message of thought would be, if you wake up today, if you're here today, there's a purpose and a plan for your life. If you wake up tomorrow, you're here. There's a reason why you're here. You just have to figure that out.
Thank you. Miguel.
My message would be to find your purpose in life. You know, Seneca discusses that, you know, how part of happiness comes through finding who you are and what you're here for. You know, I think that a lot of people in substance abuse there's a lot of frustration in the way of dreams and aspirations and things that were not done. There's also a lot of bewilderment as to what is the purpose of the individual. And if we take away all of that stuff, all that, the substances, the alcohol, the negativity, and we really find our way in life and what is it that we need to do.
Larry, give us a golden nugget and where we can reach you.
Okay, so my golden nugget would be my company's slogan, which is effecting a positive difference. And I use that because I think it challenges us as individuals to wake up every day, take a look at our surroundings, and how can we make a positive difference in that. I have a website, edwardsmentoring.com. I also have a Facebook page for my company, so all my contact information is there. If you Google my name, it'll take you to my professional profile as a counselor as well as my company, so I'm easy to be found.
And Wanda, last
Yes.
but not least, give us that golden nugget.
Stay focused. The universe is the limit.
And how do people find out about this?
We have a website. Can I give it?
Sure.
All right. For more information about Art Transforms, you can go to www.arttransforms.org. arttransforms.org. And you can see pictures we have a gallery. We have information about our board, the board of directors. We have information, you can find information there about the classes that we offer and events that that are coming up, as well as resources for other artists.
Well, to all of you out there, I'd like to thank you for joining us here at Around the Fire. And until next time, be well, be safe, and be empowered.
Your current trauma situation does not dictate your future.
Not being scared of the conversations that I had with Mr. Larry Young that I didn't listen to then, that came to the front of my thoughts when I was sitting down, having to deal with my consequences, and realizing that there was somebody who took a moment, who spoke life into me, who gave me other options, who provided insight that at the time I didn't see to be cool. And so I'm here to make that cool. I'm here to make it okay to find a reason to go ahead and speak about that hardship or that trauma, whether it's in private or in public, but get working on it, because today or tomorrow you're gonna have to tap into it, turn it into strength to be productive in America.
The vision of where the healing begins is to see survivors move beyond the pain and trauma of abuse and lead transformed lives.
You change your sister's mind, you change your sister's life.
To themselves be true. I think that for the individual as well as the community, if each and every individual could look at themselves for who he or she really is and act that way, then everything else will be better.
Stay focused. The universe is the limit.